go to film school. Always look forward to our Friday visits with our good friend, Joe Fortunato, film study professor, joins us here on the morning show, 93.5, 1590 WAKR. And Joe is going to look at the times of a actor that we lost this week. And I don't know if he was ever a number one Bill guy, but Joe will do that. But man, was he a great actor as 2 and 3 guys for so many years. And that's Robert Duvall, who passed away this week at the age of 95. But I'll let Mr. Fortunato take it from there. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Ray. Good morning, everybody. And yes, sadly, we've lost another legend. We tossed that word around, but I think it was appropriate in this instance. Today, we're going to talk about the great Robert Duvall, who, as you mentioned, we lost this past week. Duvall was born in 1931 in San Diego, California. He passed away just this last week at age 95. He was raised in a military family, and he studied acting in New York. He served briefly in the U.S. Army. And while he was a young actor, he trained alongside Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman in the early New York City acting scene. So they all knew each other and worked together. His film debut was To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962. And he had a career that spanned over 6 decades, including major roles across film, television, and even stage. And, I was putting this tribute together and I'm thinking, okay, we'll do 5 or 6 of his most significant movies. And I came up with like 10 or 11 or 12. And we might get through some of them today here. We'll see. But I just kind of want to go through a list of some of his movies. But let me just talk about him as an actor for a moment. He really was the gold standard of naturalistic acting. He helped define sort of modern screen acting, very subtle, behavior-driven, rooted in observation rather than theatrics. He was a master of the supporting role, as you mentioned. It's hard to say how many leading roles he's had, and he's had a few. But he could walk into a film and make a character unforgettable without dominating the story, which is a very rare skill. So range without showiness is maybe another way of putting it. And he was a filmmaker as well as an actor. He wrote, directed, and starred in The Apostle, which shows his own storytelling instincts. But let me kind of go through a real quick, brief list of some of his most significant movies. I said his debut was To Kill a Mockingbird. He famously played Boo Radley, almost a silent performance. He doesn't really have many, if any, lines in that film, but he's critical to the story. And that was his film debut. Another film he did early on in 1971 is George Lucas's first feature, THX 1138, which was a very odd movie, still a very odd movie. But this was part of the new Hollywood film school generation that reshaped American cinema, and Duvall was very much a part of that. And he worked with Coppola, which brings us to our next one, and probably his most famous role, The Godfather. And I'm going to kind of lump in The Godfather parts 1 and parts 2 here. And there he played the intelligent, calm, reserved consigliere, Tom Hagen, and he was just an anchor to that film and to the Corleone family. And then he went and did Apocalypse Now in 1979, where he played the great character Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. Is one of cinema's most iconic characters, despite being limited in screen time. And that's another one there he worked for Francis Ford Coppola. Then he won his Oscar for a film called Tender Mercies, where he plays Max Sledge. This was his best actor Oscar win. He probably could have won some prior to that, but here he plays a washed-up country singer, and he won an Oscar for that film. And he was no stranger to Westerns, because then he went on to do a TV miniseries called Lonesome Dove, where it was one of the most iconic TV Western performances ever. And I'll just take a break here to take a breath and let you ask whatever you want, but I've got a handful of others here just to mention.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you can still, folks, catch that Lonesome Dove most weekends. I see it all over the place on different cable outlets, and it was a very successful miniseries. And then Duvall really, I thought, blossomed even into the 80s and 90s as he grew older and took on different type of roles. I know I really liked him in The Natural when he played the reporter that was on to Robert Redford's character. But I'll let Joe take it from there. He's doing a great job. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Joe.
and that's one of the ones I wanted to mention. The rest of them here, with one or two exceptions, are kind of definitely supporting roles, but they're memorable films, and that's kind of the hallmark of Duvall's career. I talked about earlier. I mentioned The Apostle, which he wrote and directed and starred in. That was 1997. And then there's some of these iconic, like I said, supporting roles. He was the first major Frank Burns in the original MASH movie.
Yeah.
And so that's a great film. One of my favorite films is Network from 1976. He plays Frank Hackett, the network executive in that movie, and he's so great. This one is more of a leading role. In 1979, The Great Santini. This got him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. He didn't win it, but a major role. And then you mentioned The Natural from 1984. And then finally, I want to mention a film that I think is forgotten a lot, but it's really a great gem from the 90s, Falling Down. And he plays the detective pursuing Michael Douglas's vigilante in that movie. And again, just someone who makes a good movie great. And that was really, part of, what he didn't act to impress, he act to reveal, is what someone said, which I think is kind of a telling. You'll see one of the purest screen actors America's ever produced when you see a Robert Duvall movie.
Joe, sometimes you get the A-list stars, and as they get older, they become B or C's. I think of Paul Newman, who was an A-list, and then later years he was kind of like a B, and you'd see him in some of the movies starring like Kevin Costner and some of those. Robert Duvall was always the B plus guy, and he blossomed in that role and continued to be in that role all the way into the end. I remember just 5-6 years ago, maybe it's a little bit longer now, when he played in the Judge with Robert Downey Jr., and he was a judge, and Robert Downey Jr. was his son and had to defend him. And I thought he was terrific in that movie. But again, he knew that type of role his whole career. So he really did it his whole career, I should say, as being that other guy, sometimes the guy. But I just thought he was terrific in every role. I always enjoyed when he was on the screen.
Yeah, and if you're looking for, a Duvall film, we gave you a dozen here today to look up.
Yeah, I agree. He's just fabulous. Great job with that and putting that together. Robert Duvall passed away this week at 95. Well, Joe mentioned The Godfather, and Joe, I'll segue. We call that in radio. I'll segue to you on that because you and I are going to be discussing The Godfather soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be doing a Fortunato Film School live at Jilly's. You can go to my website, joefortunato.net, for information and tickets. But March 21st, Ray and I will be doing The Godfather, where we'll screen The Godfather together, and I'll do live commentary about the film. We're doing that at Jilly's Music Room, downtown Akron. That is March 21st, 11 a.m. And you want to get your tickets now because they will sell quickly, and it is reserved seating. So you want to get your choice of tickets. You can go to my website, joefortunato.net, and you definitely want to do that. Just while I'm taking a separate breath, if you go to my website, you'll see a couple of other things coming up. March 14th at 11 a.m., I have my lecture on the history of the Oscars, and we'll discuss this year's Oscars. That's the day before the Oscars at the Green Branch Library. That's a free lecture. And I did want to give a shout out quickly to the folks that came out to my lecture last week with Casablanca at the Green Branch Library. That was our best attended event maybe ever. And I was just so thrilled that we had so many people come out and enjoy that event. So we want all those same people plus, dozens more newbies to come out to see the history of the Oscars, or to join us for The Godfather at Jilly's, or both.
I like that. And Joe's right. Boy, our film schools, and I say Joe does most of the heavy lifting. I'm just supporting and doing a little Q&A, but our film schools there at Jilly's have become quite popular. And in the last couple, we've really packed them in. So if you want to join, I can't wait for Joe to dissect The Godfather. I'm so excited for this. It's coming up, as he mentioned, March 21st. Get your tickets today. All right, my friend, we'll do it again next week. Great job today looking at Robert Duvall. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Joe.
All right, see you then. Look forward to it.
You got it. Joe Fortunato, film school professor, and he joins us right here on the morning show, Friday mornings here on WAKR.